Hello and welcome to another glorious, fabulous episode of the Fully Charged Plus podcast. I am joined today by the gorgeous Daniel Caesar and the fabulous Imogen Pierce. And we're here to talk about lots and lots of very, very exciting stories, all about renewables and the transportation revolution that we're all living through. There we go. This is good. That's as grand as it's going to get. It's going to be downhill from now on. We're going to go through a few stories, and then we're going to go through a few more stories. Because Imogen's been somewhere very special recently, or maybe not that so special.
To be determined.
We've all been somewhere special recently with the Fully Charged live show. That was very special. I think we should not denigrate that. But you have been somewhere interesting, and you saw someone interesting, but we'll get to that later.
Yeah.
I just want to do a few stories, because we did there's a lot of things that we've done episodes on that have either done better or less well, and so there's more interest or less interest than we initially assumed. And I think I just want to follow up with some of those. So battery swapping, loads of people go, battery swapping, that's the solution. And you think, well, the actual integration of battery swapping is almost as big a challenge as the development of a hydrogen refueling network. You know, it's millions and millions of pounds with machinery and batteries and all that stuff. But I just love when India do stuff. They're going to do battery swapping, but for rickshaws and scooters.
You see, and I think that's where it makes a little bit more sense.
Well, a lot more sense, yeah.
And actually, I was on a panel with Neo yesterday.
Oh, good.
And they're obviously doing battery swapping. We did an episode on that. And I think for vehicles, obviously that makes sense in areas where there is zero available parking and you need to integrate that battery swapping somehow. But then when you look at the sort of two-wheeled and three-wheeled market, and you can have battery swapping stations in like corner shops, basically, that sort of occupy the same space as like a server or a vending machine, then that's amazing. Yeah. It makes complete sense.
Which, it happens a great deal already in China. I know there's battery swapping, and there's sort of thing you just turn the handle, pull it out, put yours in, and off you go again.
Well, I think we're just too binary. I think there is a future for battery swapping.
Yeah.
It's just going to be what size the market is. It might be relatively small, but I think it's happening in China. I know that Neo are rolling out battery swapping in Norway, so I think there are places that it will happen. But do you remember Jack did that Silence Scooters episode on Fully Charged Plus? You might not watch Fully Charged Plus, Robert. I don't know if you watch.
I've got a lot on. It's hard to keep up.
But you just pop the battery out on wheels and you just take it into your apartment and charge it. So I think
I do remember that, and I did watch it.
Good. So I think there is absolutely a future for it. It's just to what extent.
Yeah.
Well, also, they are about 10 kilos, which doesn't sound like a lot. But
it's quite heavy.
Yeah, I'd prefer something around the 5 mark. I'll be honest.
You've got to run upstairs to plug it in. You don't. But the reason this story's in there is because it's a government thing. It's a draft policy which proposes a standard for battery pack dimensions. Therefore, you would have one battery pack. So you might, for a rickshaw that carries 3 people, you might have 2 batteries in them. On a scooter, you'd have 1. But if that is always the critical thing. If they can build that in. Because, I've spent enough time in Mumbai to know that the air quality is possibly not the best for the average human being. It's absolutely chokingly difficult to breathe sometimes and it's very hot. And a huge proportion of that comes from old combustion engine vehicles of all sorts, so rickshaws, but also taxis and everything. So the sooner they electrify their transport fleet, which they really want to do, it would make a very noticeable instant difference. Forget climate change, forget fuel policy. Just from the point of view of human beings who live there, if they stop burning wood to cook and they stop burning oil to move, it would be better.
Yeah, in countries where they can leapfrog the grid and they can just go straight to solar. But I think the battery swap thing is interesting because there was an Israeli firm, wasn't there, that startup, A Better Place, probably 8 or 9 years ago, that arrived with a lot of fanfare, a lot of hype. It didn't go anywhere.
No.
So people have kind of written battery swap off, but I think to your point, there are definitely applications for it.
There was a Better Place battery swapping station in Denmark. It's probably still there because everywhere in Denmark is perfect except for this one building I saw that was all overgrown and kind of broken down and had graffiti on it. And it was a Better Place battery swapping station that Better Place put in a few years ago next to what is now a massive Tesla supercharger. And the letters had fallen off. Some of the letters had fallen off, which said Better Place, and it now says Bet Ace. And I don't really think it means anything, but it was just rather sad. And it all had weeds growing up, and it just sort of summed up that attempt to do a different technology.
But I think
too early.
Yeah, and when everyone sort of debates these technologies, it's sort of tempting to be like, oh, well, which one's going to be the silver bullet and which one's going to solve all our problems? I don't think it's going to be. It's
never going to be one. No.
It'll be a range of stuff.
A range of ammunition of different metals.
Side note: I worked on a steel plant in India for 3 months. That was quite an experience.
You worked in one?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Whereabouts was that?
Surat, which is sort of an industrial area.
Wow.
But I split between Mumbai and Surat, and it was it was an interesting experience.
I bet.
I did a paper round once, just in the interest of competition.
Was it in Mumbai?
I think Imogen.
If it wasn't in Mumbai, we're not interested.
It wasn't, but I just thought I should compete.
That is brilliant, though, to have that. I haven't got anything like that. I mean, I did a month for the BBC in Mumbai, so that was different. But not. But so 3 months in a steelworks. It's incredible.
Well, yeah, and actually, I had to live in a conference centre, which was the most depressing part of it. And it was sort of a pre-Netflix time, and so I watched an awful lot of Family Guy.
Right.
And so I hate Family Guy now.
Yeah.
Because it was all I watched for 3 months.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. But was that in connection with JLR? Was that?
No.
Oh, right.
This was
completely different. Right.
just an internship that I had.
Wow.
And so I was 19.
Oh my God.
But I think, yeah, I'm not entirely sure how it happened, but it was fascinating, and I learned a lot about supply chain and supply chain optimization, and working out what happens with monsoon and how that impacts sort of supply chain. So
the supply chain is definitely a topic we're going to get to. Maybe we should jump there now. I mean, the only one I just got a couple of other stories that are relevant to things in our lives, but it's just because. Oh dear, I should admit this to you now that I gave a talk at. We will talk about later at Grand Designs, which is for overseas viewers and listeners. It is a show connected to a TV series called Grand Designs, where a wonderful man goes around and looks at people who are building their own houses, and they're all different. They're all gorgeous. They're generally people about my age who are retired architects that are spending 17 million quid building a house with a lot of glass. Anyway, there's a show connected to that, and I spoke there last weekend, and I was next to a Lexus stand where there was a new Lexus, and I didn't mention it, but then someone asked me, you're very critical of Toyota and Lexus and their attitude to battery electric vehicles, and I expressed myself, but unfortunately I know the Lexus people probably could hear. So, Dan, I'm sorry.
You've really let us down, because I've got no form for criticising Toyota at all.
No, according to Toyota, you destroyed the company single-handedly.
I think that's the way they see it. That's right.
Well, they were at the event that I was at yesterday.
Oh, right.
And yes.
Okay, let's get to that in a minute. But one thing I do know is they and Honda, so two Japanese companies, are developing solid-state batteries for commercial use. It's who's going to do it first, who's going to make it work. But now Nissan have joined. So Nissan has unveiled plans to bring laminated solid-state batteries to the market by 2028. So not exactly a rush, but that's 6 years, is it? I can't do maths.
Depending on when this goes out, of course.
Of course, if you listen to this in 2027, it's next year. But yeah, so it is clearly the aim of people. And now I can't remember. I've had it explained to me in great detail, the advantages. I think it's basically smaller, more energy dense, lighter, possibly cheaper.
All of the above. But, okay, I want to make sure I get this right, and I'm almost certainly going to be corrected. But with an electrolyte... a
liquid electrolyte.
With a liquid electrolyte, I believe you are slightly more vulnerable to short-circuiting your battery cell because of dendrites formed by lithium ions, basically spiking the electrolyte and then
causing a short
circuit. But that obviously sounds a bit doom and gloom. They're really sophisticated BMS systems, battery management systems that negate that. But obviously, clearly beneficial from a light weighting density point of view as well.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't want to bring up hydrogen again.
You can do.
But, the path is set as far as I'm concerned. It's electric cars, it's electricity.
Yeah.
It's an obvious thing to say, but it is different types of batteries, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, the hydrogen industry can get as vexed as it likes about the fact that people aren't buying hydrogen cars, and that's not happening, but there's going to be better and better and better battery technologies with solid state lined up next, and then there will be other things as well, right?
Yeah.
And so, okay, nerd alert for a second. This is why I'm so excited. So I looked at an inverter on Monday.
Ooh.
Oh,
I'm not saying anything. It's just such a good sentence.
oh yeah. No, honestly, and I could see one that was from like 10 years ago and one that was from now, and it had doubled in capacity, or doubled in. Oh, this is where I get confused.
Well, I mean, probably throughput. What, is this for solar or for?
No, for electric vehicles.
For a vehicle charging?
Yeah.
All right, yes.
No, not for vehicle charging. For inside. a vehicle.
Inside, converting AC, DC, etc., etc.
So, see, with an inverter, you've got direct current being drawn from your battery,
yeah.
and then you need to convert it into alternating current so that then it can make the motor
Drive
spin,
the motor,
drive
yeah.
the vehicle. And obviously, you hear stuff around like, oh, well, electric vehicles are already 90% efficient. So then that already sounds like pretty good.
Yeah.
But then if you get from like 90 to 95, you're actually halving your losses, halving the amount of cooling that you're needing. And then you're like, well, oh my God, there's still so much stuff that we can do.
Right.
So many new, more sort of battery chemistries, ways to improve energy density. You're like, well, there's going to be a lot more stuff to come.
Yeah.
This is your area rather than mine, but motors as well. I mean, there's
Yeah.
tremendous
motors, yeah.
development in motors expected as well.
Yeah. I'm then saying, yes.
No,
I think
Let's do that on
so.
another podcast when we've actually looked into it.
Let
properly.
me
Imogen, believe
Wikipedia.
Dan and I, you know more about motors than we do. Even if you barely have ever seen one, you probably know more than we do.
Nice
I know.
motor, that's what we know.
We just
yeah.
go, nice motor. But this last story, because I just think this is interesting. So there's this, we've mentioned it before on the show many times. There's a huge earth mover in a quarry in Switzerland where peculiarly the truck goes up a mountain to get rock. And when it comes down, it's electric with batteries. I think 1.4 megawatt hours, the batteries are pretty big. It generates more electricity coming down full of rocks than it uses getting up. So it's a generator.
Yeah.
Which is kind of weird. But then there's this other one that's just started work in South Africa, which is a hydrogen fuel cell hybrid mine haul truck, which carries 150 tons of rock. Massive thing. You have to climb up a ladder to get into the cab. I've been in one once. They are like being on a ship. It's not like being on a vehicle on the land. But it's again that thing that I was really interested to see the response of our audience to the episode we did about JCB and their hydrogen combustion engines, and it was like scattering seeds on fallow ground. It didn't really take off, and it's like our audience going, yeah, that's never going to work.
Yeah.
Which is weird.
Well,
Because we don't know. I mean, I was more convinced than I expected to be by the time we left JCB that day. But I think they are still burning stuff, and where does the hydrogen come from?
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Imogen was at an event yesterday where Elon Musk was virtually present, I think, and he was
think
asked
we've got to
about
get onto that,
hydrogen.
yeah.
He was asked about hydrogen and that, and I think he dismissed it, not just for cars, but beyond that, actually, and it really is...
wrote
it's
down what he
interesting.
said.
You wrote it
Yeah.
well.
Yeah, no,
please
this is
tell
great.
us.
I think we should let's explain where you were, Imogen, because I think this is really important.
Okay.
Where you went yesterday.
So yesterday I was at the Financial Times Future of the Car event, which is a sort of, I guess, a series of panel discussions and lots of people from across the automotive and supply chain industry. So, many OEMs, many sort of CEOs, lots of people in suits. Yes. And Elon Musk did do a virtual talk at the end of the day, and it was fascinating. And it was a really, really fascinating insight into how people, particularly of tremendous power, and that you almost want to resent a little bit, how something that they can say can be taken completely out of context.
Yeah.
So the big thing that came from that is that he said he would allow Donald Trump back on Twitter. That was a 30-second segment in an hour and a half long
it's
talk,
classic, isn't
of
it?
which there was some really interesting things, including, I want to find what he said about hydrogen, but it was something along the lines of staggeringly dumb, and that there was no future for hydrogen. He was like, let's think about where the sources come from. It's either through electrolysis, which is energy intensive. So unless you can, do that with renewable energy, or it's fracking, which is burning stuff, which is not good. He'd been, the talk before him had been Toyota. And they have, said that there needs to be a range of solutions. They've said that it's still need to explore hybrids, still need to explore hydrogen. And you could sort of see them like, oh, thanks, Elon. But yeah, I mean, it was fascinating, and not least because he gave quite a bit of insight into the early days of Tesla. And there were, again, lots of sort of comments around that they were staggeringly dumb, that it was a fire dumpster of stupidity. But the early days of Tesla.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting. And so he was critical of what they did in the early days, right?
In fact, I've got a couple more.
They nearly collapsed about 4 times, didn't they, in their history? It's extraordinary.
Well, he said that they were staggeringly dumb. He said they were huge idiots and totally wrong about everything. It was a dumpster fire of stupidity. There was brutal confusion, and they screwed the pooch 6 ways till Sunday. So, really complimentary.
That sounds like an average day on the Fully Charged show.
Yeah.
Startups.
Yeah, startups.
But yes, that was the sort of outcome. He said, they said, what advice would you give to startups? And he correctly said that every OEM looking at electric vehicles is essentially a startup. And you need to be willing to make the dumb mistakes quickly and get less dumb over time. That's, again, another quote. Which I think was, absolutely fascinating.
Yeah.
Before we talk about other OEMs, though, which I think is inevitable, could you just wind back? So Toyota got on stage at an event called
The Future of the Car.
Future of the Car, and was still in 2022.
We've got to have internal combustion
pushing
engines.
for all different flavours of alternatively fueled vehicles. I mean, I don't want to be critical, but that just seems to be not reading the room in terms of what consumers are wanting to buy, right? I mean, there's obviously a clear trajectory with pure electric vehicles.
Well, I think 2 things. Number one, they stood up there and did this very comprehensive overview of how the carbon cycle works and where carbon comes from and where it's emitted and how much of that is transport. And it was like, it's quite hard to read on a slide. A bit unnecessary. Kind of, preaching to the converted a little bit already. And there was one slide in particular where they were like, we're looking at electric vehicles which have, do need some resources, which, as we know, are sort of in high demand. And the point that they were trying to make is that actually you could make smaller batteries and supplement that technology either with hydrogen or as a sort of hybrid. And I was like, no, surely the point is that not everyone needs to drive 300 miles
non-stop.
Yeah. And it's looking at that range of mobility or range of different sizes of batteries depending on how you use your vehicles, which is the exciting thing. And then you could just sort of sense this collective like, oh, all right, Toyota, fine.
Well, I think Ronald Reagan said, if you're explaining, you're losing.
Yeah.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
That's all I would say. You're competing against something that's much simpler to understand, to roll out, to market. And they're in a position where they're having to explain why they're doing constantly and defend their position constantly rather than selling vehicles or even making them. But that's all I'm going to say, Robert.
Yeah.
They did bring up the supply chain thing, and I think that is valid. Like lithium has gone up 400% recently or whatever it is. But it's not so much because there aren't the resources, it's that we don't have people mining them, and we don't have that end-to-end supply chain. And JB Straubel.
I never know how to say it. Straubel.
No,
Straubel's close.
JB of Redwood Materials. He had some.
So did he speak remotely as well?
No, he was there in person.
He was there.
Yeah. Oh yeah, like proper battery celeb.
Yeah, no, he's my top battery celeb.
Oh yeah, there were some real
right.
fanboys there. Yeah, mainly fanboys, not so many women at this event.
Oh, right.
Anyway, it's by the by. But yeah, JB, we'll go with that.
Yeah.
He was there from Redwood Materials, and he was saying that we've got to think on a much longer time horizon, and clearly we've got a big mining issue right now. And that will be challenging, and we need to address it. But at some stage, there'll be a critical mass whereby you're getting those materials back in. Plus, we're looking at not just second life of batteries, but third life and fourth life and fifth life. And we've got loads more sort of machine learning and data to actually extend the usable life of batteries in operation anyway. So put that stuff together, and we're going to be all right.
He was pretty optimistic then.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Did he tell you what? Did he tell you what JB stands for? It's not Jim Bob, is it, or something like that? Because that would be good.
It stands for Giant with a J Batteries. Yeah, that's on his passport.
That's his given name.
That is very exciting. But I don't think we can say, because it's so difficult. You know, we've constantly got to struggle to understand outside the bubble. Because I think, however much I struggle to be aware of other attitudes, it is very difficult to see outside the bubble. I'm thinking in terms of Toyota and internal combustion engine, and they are kind of clinging to that. And it's interesting, is the Japanese car industry, I think it is the Japanese car industry that are really struggling with that change. So Honda, Nissan to a lesser extent, because they've done pretty well with electric vehicles. Although they haven't really supplied a massive range, but they have at least, I kind of feel their commitment to it is genuine. But Honda definitely struggle with it, and Toyota absolutely chronically. And then you look at around every other big country that produces, so Germany, pretty obvious, even if they've made weird mistakes and done weird things, they're pretty committed to electric vehicles across their manufacturing base. China, obviously, is that. America, you'd think would be the one that would hold out. Actually, I don't think it is. I think Ford and GM will produce a lot of electric vehicles and are committed to it in real terms. And the other one is that splitting off, like Renault. We talked about that recently, that Renault are thinking of splitting off their electric car division. So in effect, creating a startup that is a completely new
I think Ford are
company.
doing something
and
different.
Ford, yeah.
Similar, and then you've got Polestar have already gone down that path, haven't they?
Yeah.
Well, some fun facts for you.
Okay, good. I want to hear more fun facts.
Also, I've said this and now I'm like, oh my God, all the numbers have gone out of my brain. So I think registrations for electric vehicles in the US are 4.75%. And across Europe, it's now 10%, which is amazing. And
big chunk. It used to be always 1 or slightly under 1%. Yeah, so it's definitely gone up.
And I think the US is interesting right now in particular because GM and Ford have both been very bullish of, we're going to sell more electric vehicles than Tesla, particularly GM. But there's also an element of like, all right, there are elements and materials that can make batteries in the United States.
Yeah.
It's huge potential to have a completely domestic automotive industry. So there is an element of like, America, electric vehicles.
Vehicles, I think they call it.
Vehicles.
Yeah, we've got lots of American listeners as well. But
I'm so sorry, that was a terrible accent.
No, I think it was the best American accent I've ever heard in my life.
Did Elon Musk talk about that? Because obviously Tesla has said itself it's going to get more into the lithium mining game. And
what did he say? I wrote this down as well. He said, I've written, what else did he say?
But notes, pages
and
of
pages of notes.
We're not used to this level of detail.
Honestly, he just had a fascinating amount of like good nuggets. But he said they will do whatever is needed to accelerate the transition to electric vehicles and sustainable energy. And if acquiring mining companies is part of that, then that's something that they will explore.
I mean, I just want to say very quickly, wouldn't it have been a different story if Elon Musk said, we've just bought the biggest mining company in the world, not Twitter? I'm just saying, as I pass. Yeah. It'd be slightly more interesting. Anyway, I don't even want to, let's not even talk about that because everyone else is talking about it and it is boring. So.
But the fun things that I wish the news could have covered is that he didn't say, I think when we talk about OEMs and we read the news and that kind of thing, you see like, oh, this so-and-so is leading in Germany or so-and-so is leading in the US. He doesn't talk in those terms. He talks about, we are the fastest automotive company in terms of scaling manufacturing on planet Earth in the history of the world. Yeah. And it gives you an indication of where is his brain at and how does he see the sphere of influence that he can, influence. Yeah. And it was things like he was saying, to open a manufacturing plant in China, previously you'd have to have a 51% JV joint venture with the Chinese government. And he was like, that doesn't seem very sensible. And the government overturned it. But actually that creates, more opportunities for other OEMs, not just Tesla. So. Right.
But that's the difference between Tesla and everyone else, isn't it? They've started with a blank sheet of paper. We all know that. Yeah. They've got benefits from that. But also they've got and I use the second word, very carefully, but they have a benevolent dictator in charge. You might not agree with Elon Musk, you might agree with every word he says, but they've actually got one person broadly saying this is how we're going to do it. Where if you go to the boardrooms of, in Munich or Tokyo, wherever, you're going to find a huge amount of people trying to make decisions, and how do you turn all of those people around towards electrification is incredibly difficult.
And he said that exactly, that you can only really do it with a completely blank sheet of paper. And with the Tesla Roadster, he said that obviously they used a Lotus chassis, and they ended up using just 6% of the Lotus chassis.
Lotus, it gradually shrank.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, they did it. I didn't know that. Yeah.
Just got a, completely clean sheet. So,
well, actually, Jack and I will be driving the original Tesla Roadster in a forthcoming episode, which is going to be amusing because when I sat in it, I'm 6 foot tall. When I sat in it, my head was above the windshield. So when Jack sits in it,
I'm not sure he will be able to sit.
I don't know if he can get in. I mean, I couldn't get out. I had to, genuinely, I'm not making a joke. When I had driven it about 120 miles, I got back to the Tesla showroom, which was a tiny garage at the time. And honestly, 2 young men had to pull me out. I could not get out of the car. It's just,
could he put his legs through the bottom Flintstones style?
Maybe. Might be able to run along.
I think we need to put me in it, and then we can, dub over with Jack's voice.
Well, because the two of you in the, which will be, this may be, you may have seen this by the time you see this. Was it the Nebo? I never know how to say it. This is Nebo. No Bay. I've got it completely around the wrong way. Nebo, I think, is a Japanese food company.
It's the plane company.
It's the electric plane.
The electric plane.
That's why it's on the brain.
I've got it on my hat.
Nebi.
The two of you in that
say that Nebi is a heat pump company as well.
Nebi is the heat pumps.
If we get Nebo, and Nobi next year, you'll be screwed.
Can we have those 3 companies in a row at Fully Charged Live? Just to do my head in. But yeah, there are 2 of you in that car, because when you got in, it looked like a normal car. And when Jack got in, it looked like, honestly, like an inflatable car that you get in a Christmas cracker.
Well, you see, and that's the problem I have, is that I think I find it hard to know how tall I am. So I see Jack and I'm like, oh, we're the same height and we're the same size. And then we stand next to each other and I'm like, oh no, you are a foot and quite a bit more taller than me.
He is, But anyway, we shouldn't talk about Jack's height.
He's on holiday.
He's on holiday. He's stretched out in the sun, but it does go from the hotel entrance to the beach. And that's a kilometre. There was something relevant that we were saying then that was about Japanese car makers, Toyota. There was a question you asked.
Well, I'm interested that you were in a automakers event, specifically, and you were in that bubble, and then we inhabit a different bubble. We just had Fully Charged Live, which is a different bubble entirely, and then you were in a different bubble on Saturday. I came to watch you talk at something. Yes. You talked to a totally different group of people.
Very different group of people. The second one, can I just say, Dan, that you weren't at was much better.
I thought the first one was
quite good.
I'm not just saying, I think you called everyone fascists.
I did call it.
My son was there and he was like, what's a fascist, Daddy? I was like, I'll tell you later.
I said that that people like me were eco-fascists, that were going to crush your freedom and force you into an electric car in an endless history of misery from the
normal stuff.
Normal sort of thing. No,
daily musings.
I did in the second talk. I said that any building company that is building new houses now that aren't a passive house standard with ground source heating, solar panels, and a battery and car charger outside should be imprisoned in an uninsulated cell.
Well, do you know what?
That caused a bit of a stir.
I mean, I might have
building
raised
conference.
I've had an email about that, actually.
Have you really?
No.
HR.
HR. Call HR.
Well, I think, obviously you have a certain charm and you can phrase things like that, and other people might have, tiptoed around the subject. But the fact is that obviously that's the responsible thing to do from an environmental perspective. Yeah. It's also the necessary thing to do from a cost of living perspective.
Yes. Very, very important to do it. Yeah, no, it is. And I mean, particularly because that was I focused more on the second talk, which is in a bigger theatre with but next to Lexus. That was the only awkward bit. But to sort of focus on buildings and houses and how you heat homes without burning gas and all those things, that sort of aspect of it. So, yeah, but it was interesting to talk to that audience, although, to be honest, the people that gathered at those theatres were probably interested anyway. So they were on the cusp of our bubble, even if it wasn't like I was talking to I've talked to super hostile groups of men in the automotive industry in the past. That's a very different experience, talking to them.
Yeah. Because I think it's been fascinating having gone from Fully Charged Live, which is not just a great event, but it's a really great community of people actively developing really cool solutions or who want to sort of participate in the conversation. And then going to FT Future of the Car, which is some of the people really driving these decisions, lots of CEOs or very senior people from automotive companies, and trying to sort of suss out, well, where do those bubbles overlap and where do they sit slightly separately? And I came away and I was like, oh, they're not overlapped enough yet. And I think that's important because it means that we've still got work to do, and things like us wanging on about.
Yes, we're not irrelevant.
Yeah,
what
we're not irrelevant.
To say. No.
We still have jobs.
Yes, we still have a job to do.
Well, we'd love to get some of those sort of senior people to Fully Charged Live,
Yeah.
to show them that there is this bubble of its own, which is growing very, very fast.
Yeah.
But then at Grand Designs Live, I walked around and looked at it through the kind of energy and transport lens, and there's very little there, which is kind of understandable. There was a kind of a small energy saving home. There was probably, I think there was a solar heat pump company there. My Energy were there. Our sponsors. But there wasn't much there, and it was, I guess it was lots of people who were looking to kind of spend money on the cushions and curtains and maybe some of the architectural things around their house. Probably quite, I'd say, liberal audience, maybe quite open-minded to electric vehicles, but there was barely a trace of that in that room.
Yeah. There was the Lexus 100% electric vehicle there, which looks very nice, which we haven't test driven because one day we will. When we meet someone who owns one, then we can borrow theirs and do a review. I'm being really rude because I'm in communication with the lovely people at Toyota, so I'm sure something will come out of it.
Through a mediator, or
we're going to group therapy to try and get through it. No, but the general feeling I got from that audience, which we automatically assume that with our audience, that everyone that goes there to our live shows, if nothing else, more or less accepts that something has to change. And what was interesting was at Grand Designs, that felt the same. It wasn't people going, "This will never work," like it would have been even 5 years ago. No one asked, "What about the batteries?" or "They'll run out," or "What about the what about we're going?" Although someone did ask about burning down the grid, but that was only one person. But generally they accept that this is going to happen. They're not sure about the details. They're not sure about the ins and outs of it. There will, and I always say, electric cars aren't green, and there will be disadvantages. That's just because all technology, there's no silver bullet. All technology is imperfect.
And I think that is the thing that sort of, it's a home event, a car event. Fully Charged is that sort of like bridge that brings those two together. And what might be difficult to unpick for people coming into this sort of space is that it's not just talking about cars anymore. This is talking about how it relates to your home, how it relates to sort of energy, how it relates to supply chain. And suddenly there's so many more verticals that are combining and merging that, it's not just, we're sort of beyond just accepting it. We're like, okay, right, well, what are the different bits and pieces that we can understand in there?
That's the thing. I was wondering if there was any discussion of the future of the car is car sharing, because that's clearly not a thing that the car industry is that keen on, because that means we'd buy less cars.
So quite a few luxury marks there.
Right.
And obviously, well, not obviously, but I think they're looking for much more customization and personalization such that you're justifying owning your own vehicle.
Right.
But there were some other interesting people like Finn, who are a leasing company. Not so much car sharing, but that could have just been because of the day that I was there. But I think some of these OEMs, this is a massive sweeping assumption and probably really unfair, but maybe are still slightly siloed with regards to where they fit in this sort of whole sphere of shared services and that kind of thing, which is silly because we also have so much data coming from these vehicles and so much of an opportunity to understand how you could optimize where vehicles sit within a city. But it feels like there may be one step behind where those things are going.
To what extent then did you feel the future of the car was the future of the car that the automakers wanted to see, as opposed to the mega trend that's going on around the world that actually they have very little control over?
Oh man, it was, I don't know is the honest answer. I think, and also I was there on one day and each day had like a slightly different
themes,
themes and focus, but the future of the car is not so much the future of the car, it's future of mobility.
Yep.
And to have that as a really robust conversation, you can't just have car makers. You need mobility service providers, you need
Public
home
transport
energy,
people.
public transport, mining, whoever else. And they all need to be in the room, because otherwise it just creates a big echo chamber or a very singular view of where the industry's going, in my view.
I mean, that's in a way an important thing that we need to highlight on Fully Charged Show, not only the live shows, but on the actual show, is that aspect of it, which I kind of know, but I kind of take for granted that we're talking about that, but it might need actually stating clearly, this is not just, when I say the show's not just about cars.
Well, you've had we're coming from literally an analog world where it's possible to have lots of different silos to a digitized world
Which
where
it needs
everything's
to be
been broken
connected.
down and all the silos are being smashed together. And if you don't understand that, there's been quite a lot of talk, and Nissan were doing quite a lot with Second Life batteries. I think they still are, but there was talk of, I think VW started a business called Ellie, which I think was involved with charging and other things. There were other businesses, car companies were trying to get into that space, but obviously it's very difficult to get into an adjacency, no matter how big your brand is or how many customers you've got. But I think that's what's difficult, isn't it? Tesla have, without wishing to over-reference them, have started from a different place. Hence the supercharger network, which remains the number one moat around their business as it stands.
Well, they did sort of talk about that, in that software and hardware for Tesla were equally important from day dot.
From day one, yeah.
And that affords you an opportunity to think far more critically about the user experience and that whole ecosystem of stuff to enable you to drive seamlessly. And for lots of other companies, software might be more of an afterthought or a bit more of a nice to have, and it's a much more difficult retrofit. But I am moderating a panel at FT Future of the Car on the future of charging infrastructure. And I think the outcome of that, I hope the outcome of that, will be how do, things like the national grid, OEMs, charge point operators, policy regulators actually have to come together and recognise they probably can't have a monopoly on it and just be like, right, how the hell do we fix this problem and make it easy for consumers? Because it's dependent on systems which were built at a time when you didn't have a crystal ball and could see this electric future. So it does need that help of like, okay, this is a challenge, but we can fix it. We need to fix it together. I
was just thinking there's a sort of topic emerging, it feels like, that is new, that is a new shape of discussion that's emerging out of all these conferences that we're going to, the ones we're running. I'm doing one tomorrow. I'm chairing 2 talks on the future of the electric vehicle. It's a really hot topic of discussion that's going on.
Yeah, and my theory is that battery chemists are about to be quite cool.
I think you're right.
Yeah. And what's tricky about that is that developing new battery chemistries might take like 20 years from sort of start to the very finish. And venture capitalists, OEMs, they want things on a quicker timeline. So what can the industry do to make those timelines much more condensed? And there's other things like AI, machine learning that are helping accelerate those things. But it means that because we're focusing on bits that aren't just the car, these other bits of it are going to get much more attention.
Yeah.
And also car companies need to think about how that comes together and what is the future of the car. And I would say it's not cars, it's mobility and energy as a
thing.
Once global capital and government capital all swings foursquare behind energy storage, not just lithium ion, but all types of batteries, all types of energy storage, then it becomes like a space race or a vaccine race, doesn't it? Where everyone is on the same mission. We're not quite there yet, but I don't think we're that far away from that.
Yeah.
And also, there was a great report in the Times on Saturday. Yes, it was in the Times on Saturday, the London Times, about what's going to happen in the energy market in the next 20 years. So once we reach 40 gigawatts of offshore wind, which is what's being built now, 40 gigawatts. Our average consumption in a day is about 25 to 30 gigawatts. That's what the country consumes. Peaks is up to 62, 63 gigawatts. But if we're producing 40 gigawatts of wind, this whole report was about how much storage that we need. One, how much storage we need, but two, we will have peaks and troughs in generation, obviously, with that. And the peaks have got to be used, otherwise it's a waste. And so so therefore price variation is here to stay. Because I've sort of assumed, you know, when I've been on I think it was the Octopus Agile tariff, and I did charge my car and got paid for it, you know, that 2 nights, I think, or 2 or 3 nights in a year. You know, it was an amazing thing. I thought, well, that won't last, because the more electric cars there are and the more people doing that off-peaking will be. But this report very clearly stated, and this was from the National Grid, no, that's going to just get more of a problem. That we have to use that electricity.
But that's power related, right? So let's not forget heat, and that's where things like thermal storage, whether it's a, I don't know, sun amp or you know, night storage, modern night storage heating or something like that. That's where that comes into play. Or a Tepio
boiler, just to pick a product out of the blue.
The more power that we can use and store in different ways, we can obviously, electrification of heat is a huge theme for the next 10, 15 years. And
the fact, I don't want to harp on about it because I get teased by the crew. That I used to go on about our broadband being fast. I now go on about my solar. But today, I had to charge a car last night on off-peak electricity for the first time in 6 days. So we did 6 days in the United Kingdom without using 1 electron from the grid.
Oh my God.
Which is, I think, amazing. And we've charged cars in that time as well as run a house, you know. So it is, you would never be able to do that all year round, but the fact that you can do it for a chunk of the year for people who are really experiencing difficulty paying for gas imported from Russia. All right, and Norway. You know the annual reduction in your bill if you're not paying for electricity for some weeks of the year is huge.
Well, also, you know, the fact that you can have a bit of a like Minority Report app and completely understand where energy is flowing.
From and going to.
Yeah, and suddenly it's not just this sort of ethereal thing and how does the National Grid, oh, we have no idea. It's this thing that you can be really, really connected to and understand how it impacts your life and where you should be sort of charging things and have much more control. So even if you have got that fluctuation, giving consumers control, I think will be a really powerful thing.
But I think that was the gist of it, was that the fluctuation has you know, everyone goes, well, you know, renewables are intermittent. What if renewables being intermittent was a positive advantage? That was the message that was starting to come through, that once you've got enough, it's not, oh God, it's the problem of intermittency. No, it's not a problem. It's a massive advantage.
Yeah, I mean, the word that's better is complementarity. So in solar, in Texas, their solar marries up really well with
wind,
aircon.
Right, with aircon, same in Australia,
and,
very much
and you've
so.
got the, you know, the compatibility of wind and solar. Obviously, here in the UK, it's typically windier during the winter and windier at night. You know, so you can marry these things up. They might not be, you know, on all the time, but they're pretty predictable. Yeah, and you can actually build that into the system.
I would love a gutter generator, so that like now it's raining quite heavily, which hasn't done. We've had a very dry spring here, but it's raining now. And if you had a little generator in your gutter, in your downpipe generator, that just fed a battery, well, that would be amazing.
So there was this family friend that we had growing up, and they had a daughter who was just like perfect. Of her GCSE coursework, she built one of those.
No, you're kidding.
Yeah. And I was like, oh, right, I wrote about something much less exciting or complicated. But she built one as part of her GCSE. So I mean,
what's she doing now? Does she want to present on Fully Charged Show?
Well, she should. Why isn't she here? But it's possible, I think, is the conclusion.
Yeah. I don't think it would probably make economic sense because it depends how much rain you've got. If you live in Seattle, well, I've only ever been to Seattle in heavy rain, you know, so that's, you know, that would work. Portland, Oregon, they get a lot of rain, just saying.
Yeah. Vancouver, they get a lot of rain.
Yeah, downpipe generators. Yeah. Oh, we're not mentioning that.
Oh,
sorry.
I think Robert's mentioned it 2 or 3 times already, but let's pretend. Let's save the big launch for next month.
But anyway, Dan, just as a passing casual comment, what have we got coming up in the next couple of weeks?
Well, talking of weather, Robert, it's going to be really sunny in Amsterdam next weekend.
Well, that sounds like a good reason to pop over to Amsterdam.
It is, isn't it? If you're not bored of Fully Charged Live, you can come to Fully Charged Live Europe in Amsterdam on Friday the 20th, Saturday the 21st, and Sunday the 22nd of May. And we'll be out there doing all the same things again, but better and different. We've got lots of live panels. So Imogen's sadly not going to be there, but you'll be there. Jack will be there. I'll be there. Helen will be there. We have a couple of Dutch voices, Frauke Janssen, Rainier Vanderberg, so you don't have to do your accent.
Will not dream of doing my very bad Dutch accent. That would be very offensive.
And the best thing I think about the European event is that it's going to be quite different, really quite different to what we've just seen in Farnborough. Farnborough was great, but obviously this is a first-year show, and we've got, I would say, some really kind of, I don't want to offend people, but kind of weird and wonderful things coming to this. So we've just released an episode on the Stella Vita, which is the amazing 600-kilometer solar camper that's been developed by, is it the University of Eindhoven?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah,
students,
extraordinary.
22
Amazing.
students.
Yeah.
It's incredible.
Amazing.
Yeah.
So we've got them there. We've got the much more developed solar car company, Lightyear.
Who come out of Eindhoven.
We've got Squad Solar, brand new, smaller solar car, sort of city car, really kind of small, compact. They're launching and they're coming to the show. We've got Xpeng making their
From
kind
China.
of debut in Europe. We've got just some amazing things. So we've got Nobe.
Yes.
Maybe Nebo, but not Nebi. And I'm just glad I got that. I'm glad I got that right. But we've also got things like the B Triton. I know you're excited about that. I am as well, which is it's described as a amphibious camper trike. So you can cycle it, you can sleep in it, and it can go on water as well. It's just extraordinary. So we've got that there. We've got Arrival with their van there. Electric Avenue with loads of different types of cars.
So most of the electric vehicles that are available in Europe will be on display in some way.
We're gathering all those from different owners around Europe. So if anyone's listening to this and wants to bring their electric vehicle, maybe we can.
If you've got something unusual,
but there's just some fascinating things that we've got coming to the show. I'm sure I've forgotten something, but we're
be good.
Really looking forward to getting out there.
There's a lot of boats. I mean, that's the thing.
There's boats.
Be a lot of electric
yachts
boats.
are there. There's actually a sort of little harbour, electric harbour. No, that doesn't quite work, but there's a little harbour running alongside the venue, so people can go on an electric boat and go on a little bit of a tour. Obviously, it's Holland, so loads of electric bikes and micromobility and motorbikes and mopeds. So all the normal stuff you probably expect to see at a Fully Charged show, but different.
Not that I'm suggesting this, but it feels like with all of this emergence of weird and wonderful different types of mobility, like the solar camper van, like the bike boat from B Triton, actually you've got loads more range if you were on the run and needed to, stealthily run away and go off grid. You go 600 kilometers without plugging in the solar camper. Bike boat can go on any terrain. Yeah. So any vigilantes.
I mean, the thing that we haven't underlined in all the headlines about the camper is that they actually went effectively from say 300 miles south or 500 south of Paris, but they went from there all the way to the south of Spain, and they never plugged in. I mean, they did over 1,000 kilometers without ever plugging in because they charged it from the solar. But they camped for a couple of days and that charged the batteries again. It's an amazing story what they did.
Yeah, and just they were so casual about it as well. Just like, we did it. It's good.
Solar sales have picked up in the UK and probably elsewhere because of energy independence. And so people are suddenly going, well, how can I off-grid my house or island it insofar as possible? And the camper, again, these technologies all kind of speak to that kind of pre-apocalypse life. And all from the sun, and by the way, we have My Energy obviously are going to be at Fully Charged Live Europe as well.
That's very good of you to mention that, Dan, because I was just about to bring up My Energy, who are the wonderful and glorious and gorgeous sponsors of this podcast, and we're very, very grateful and proud to be sponsored by them. And I'm very happy to say, I can always say this from direct experience, that my house is My Energied up to the eyeballs. So I have a lot of My Energy equipment in my house. The most obvious one being the Zappi charger, which the other day added over 200 miles to the Tesla Model 3 from the sun, because we'd already got full batteries and we just plugged the car in and it just took it from the sun. And it's like one of the longest days I've ever plugged the car in and used the Zappi. So the Zappi just takes the solar and puts it in the car, and if you put the kettle on in the house, then the amount drops. If there's a cloud goes over, the amount drops. But it did do it, and the Tesla took, I think it might have been 180 miles. It was a lot of miles. It was a hell of a lot of miles. I couldn't believe what it did in a day from solar. But I generated about 55 kilowatt hours that day, so it was a very sunny day. Anyway, and that's My Energy made that possible. And the Eddy, I love the fact that I've got an Eddy in a cupboard. and he's in there happily doing stuff, and I don't know what he does. But all I know is I've got hot water, and I've got cooking, and I've got electricity for everything, and Eddie's worked out where it should go.
Not a person, though, is it?
It's not a person.
Okay, just to be
it's a
clear.
little white box, but I think of him as a person. I do actually occasionally go. I open the cupboard door and go, "You're right."
Oh, I have to admit, I am so jealous. I really want to look at our house and see what we could do and start to sort of, control
those things
it.
in. I mean, I do feel very privileged now that I've got battery, all those things, because what's been interesting and what I really want to underline is with that technology that's tying that stuff together, and it's developing all the time. And My Energy are coming up with amazing new products in the next couple of years, but it does work as a notion that if you can generate power on your roof and you can store some of it in your house, and you've got systems that are integrated and talk to each other, it works. I'm not suffering. We don't have to have cold showers because it hasn't been sunny. So although my daughter likes having cold showers, which I think is weird.
Oh, no, but people like the celebrities are saying that's the new beauty secret.
Oh, for goodness sake. That's why
You're
I'm
a
so
celebrity.
ugly.
You're a celebrity, Robert.
Well, I'm a very ugly, if I am, I'm a very ugly one, because I cannot go, I would not have a cold shower. That's just too much. Oh, goodness me. Anyway, do you think we should round up? I think we should round up. We're getting some nods from the crew.
I think we're starting to talk about you having a shower, so yes, I think we should round
Actually, we're getting some nods from the crew. That is, they're nodding off. They've had enough. But,
Stop wittering.
Yeah,
God.
stop wittering. But please tell your friends about... maybe don't tell them if you're worried about them not liking you. But if you're not worried about that, tell your friends about the Fully Charged Plus podcast. They might love it. Tell your family. Do subscribe to this on your podcast downloading app or on YouTube. If you want, you can have a look at the little Patreon link that's in the show notes of this episode. We are very grateful to all our wonderful Patreon supporters that keep us going through thick and thin. And I think that's about it, isn't it? Come to Amsterdam if you're anywhere near the wonderful, beautiful city in the Netherlands, and come and see Fully Charged Live Amsterdam. And we'll do some reports on it afterwards. I'm sure it's going to be great fun. We're really looking forward to it. But that's it. As always, if you have been, thank you for listening.
Okay.